I really have tried to stay away from feminist frequency, but in her last video I noticed a certain trend, and I haven't seen a response directly dealing with this issue. So I must deal with it.
If you want to get to know a character, learn about their interests, goals, or desires...
Actually, I don't want to get to know a character in any game. Games are goal-oriented activities, and therefore all I need to know is what are the goals. And video game characters are not people. They have no interests, goals, or desires. At least no more than the player who plays them.
Their butt is probably not going to give you that information.
Which is why no video gamer ever cared about any video game butt. It does not further the goal achievement activity.
It won't tell you much about who they are or what they're thinking or feeling at any given time.
This might be because a video game avatar is not a who. They aren't a person, they don't think, they do not have feelings.
But video game designers often choose to put tremendous focus on the butts of certain characters.
1. Because they are technically artists, and just like any artist, they want to do the best work they can in the medium of their choice. 2. Because presenting the product in a manner that interests your primary demographic makes you money and is considered a good thing. It works the same way with victim narratives, as you well know.
While going to almost absurd lengths to avoid calling attention to the butts of others.
Which is worse? A. You personifying game avatars, or B. You othering persons.
These carefully crafted choices developers make about camera angles and clothing significantly impact how players think about and relate to these characters.
No. They are a means to achieving the goals of a goal-oriented activity. They are still not people. They are avatars with which relationships are impossible.
Third-person games with female protagonists typically display those characters in a way that gives players a full-body view.
As they also do with male protagonists?
A classic example of this is the original Tomb Raider games, which are presented from a third-person perspective wherein protagonist Lara Croft's entire body is visible.
Well, except for the front of her body, right? You may need to discover the definition of entire.
In these early Tomb Raider games, Lara's butt is typically right in the center of the screen, a camera orientation which, along with the sexualized clothing the designers choose to outfit her in, places a tremendous amount of emphasis on that part of her body.
Yes, if you put your eye right up to the TV screen, you might just be able to see her 2D butt well enough to objectify her. Also, khaki shorts and a shirt is now sexualized clothing. Burqas for everyone.
In dozens of third-person games with playable female characters, the character's butt is brought to the forefront, and that's where the player's focus is directed.
It's not that third-person games typically are seen from behind the character, and the butt is also at the rear of the body. It's sexualization and objectification. And also not artists creating non-living and unfeeling art that is accurate to the medium and is of appreciable quality. It's a misogynist agenda to objectify.
In Batman Arkham City, for instance, the player's gaze is drawn to Catwoman's behind, which is emphasized by her costume and exaggerated hip sway.
It's not 40 years of backstory established over multiple mediums. Again, it's objectification. Never mind that the player's focus is probably actually on the next goal to be achieved.
And here, in Tomb Raider Underworld, to say that Lara's butt is being emphasized would be putting it mildly.
To say that you've just selected a camera angle specifically to emphasize your point, but that does nothing for actual gameplay, is putting it mildly.
Let's contrast the way that women's butts are emphasized with the sometimes absurd lengths taken to cover up or hide men's butts.
They are not women, and they are not men. They are playable video game avatars, nothing more. And given the following examples, your next quest is to uncover the definition of absurd.
If some of this footage looks jerky, that's because in some games, trying to get a glimpse of male characters' butts can feel a bit like wrestling with the camera.
Which tells us much about how little you actually play the games.
Common ways men's butts are hidden are by preventing the player from seeing below the character's waistline.
When using confirmation bias with confirming camera angles, when other angles are available.
Or employing a more over-the-shoulder camera angle, which has the added benefit of keeping the character's butt safely out of the frame.
Or as my son rightly points out,
being able to keep the enemies in view of the player,
which actively prevents the player from getting a clear or sustained look at the protagonist's butt.
Which should have been a clear indication to you that seeing or not seeing the character's butt, male or female, is no hindrance to the player. But of course, you didn't get it.
For the purposes of this video, I tried to get a glimpse of Batman's rear end, but it's as if his cape is a high-tech piece of Wayne Industries equipment designed to cover up his butt at all costs.
Or it might just be that Batman is an iconic character that has worn a cape for over 50 years across multiple mediums, and there is no way you could have not been aware of that fact.
I like to jokingly refer to this aspect of a male character's costume as the strategic butt covering.
Okay, so like a skirt, dress, or sweater tied around a waist? It is so unfair that artists have figured out top secret female operations. How can we stop them?
The real issue is one of emphasis and definition.
No. The real issue is what is causing you to emphasize a non-issue. People have butts. Roughly half of them have one type of butt, the other half another type. So what is your issue with artists representing the world as it really is?
A significant portion of third-person games with female protagonists call attention to those characters' butts in a way that's meant to be sexually appealing to the presumed straight male player.
Or female butts are appealing to straight males, and artists drawing realistic characters draw realistic characters.
In this regard, the way that women's bodies are depicted is significantly different from the way that men's bodies are depicted.
Because male bodies are significantly different than female bodies? At some point you had the talk, right? I don't have to explain this, right?
But nothing about his visual design or the jeans he's wearing encourages you to focus on his butt as some sort of defining aspect of his character.
Perhaps because his butt is not a defining aspect of his character, and therefore the game designers didn't need to encourage you to focus on it? They also don't encourage you to focus on female characters' butts. You do, however, focus on whatever you are predisposed to focus on, Anita.
By contrast, this emphasis on the butts of female characters communicates to players that this is what's important. This is what you should be paying attention to.
Your sexually dimorphic female detail-oriented brain might believe that to be true. But my male, sexually dimorphic, big picture-oriented brain says no.
It communicates that the character is a sexual object designed for players to look at and enjoy.
So are you saying the artists who create these characters should be going for avoid and despise?
And by explicitly encouraging you to ogle and objectify the character, the game is implicitly discouraging you from identifying directly with her.
I have never seen the following disclaimer on any media item ever. Your next quest is to determine the correct definitions of explicitly and encourage. And it's not a her. It's a fucking avatar.
Strategic butt coverings and camera angles that obscure characters' rear ends are not an accident. They are a conscious decision made with great care, and the flip side of this is that designers often do the opposite when the protagonist is female.
Except for when they don't. as you are about to give us such an example.
This difference in how male and female characters are framed often extends into the advertisements and box covers. Women's butts are front and center.
They are not women.
And it's even become a depressing joke that their bodies are twisted and contorted in uncomfortable or unnatural ways so that their breasts and butt can be visible in the same shot.
They are non-living, non-physical avatars. Their bodies, which do not exist, cannot be twisted in uncomfortable or unnatural ways.
In contrast, when men are depicted from behind,
they are not men.
Of course, female characters can also be framed in ways that aren't objectifying.
No, they can't, because just like all male characters, all female characters are avatars. That is to say, an object meant to represent the player's perspective within the game.
A good example of this is the episodic adventure game Life is Strange, in which the protagonist's butt isn't emphasized or centralized. The camera angles work in conjunction with the story to encourage us to identify with her as a human being.
It is not a human being. It has no human identity, beyond the identity of the player playing it.
Rather, the solution is to de-emphasize the rear ends of female characters.
And of course, the breasts of the female characters, then the facial structure of the female characters, the specific clothing choices of the female characters, until finally there is only the totally androgynous blob available to game designers.
So that players are encouraged not to ogle and objectify these women, but to identify and empathize with them as people.
Not fucking women. Not fucking people. Stop personifying non-living computer code.